Hello, I'm Johnny Depp if Amber Heard had gone for the face, and today we're looking at the top 10 horror role-playing games of all time. As I have frequently belaboured on this channel, horror games are some of the hardest to do, second perhaps only to comedy in difficulty. So it is definitely worth picking out some games that help out in some way, help create the right sense of horror, or just play well at the table, because so much else is working against you. So whether it's the rules, or the atmosphere, or the presentation, or whatever else, these are the games that I think do horror right in a variety of ways. You can't really mention horror TTRPGs without mentioning the Mac Daddy Call of Cthulhu. It's been around a long time. It almost single-handedly kept H.P. Lovecraft relevant and familiar to people, so I guess you can blame Call of Cthulhu and Chaosium for all the Cthulhu plushies and things that we see around today. There's a lot of criticism of Lovecraft and hence Call of Cthulhu, but regardless, the game and the fiction seems to weather the storms largely, and as a touchstone for investigative horror, I don't think you can do a lot better than Call of Cthulhu, purely due to its age and the sheer amount of material that is available out there. It's hard to do right, but like pizza, even bad Call of Cthulhu is okay. In the history of tabletop horror RPGs, Chill is kind of that also ran, a bit forgotten. Chill was out of date kind of almost the moment it came out originally, and while there were attempts to update it over time, it never quite managed to catch up, and so languished. Chill was more of a Universal Monsters sort of horror game, and as such, playing it tended to end up a bit more Monster Squad or Fright Night, things like that, rather than the kind of horror that was arguably more fashionable at the time. Nonetheless, I still have a soft spot for it. It doesn't do anything particularly well, but it's good enough that in the round, in the whole, it's still a really enjoyable game to play when maybe you're feeling a little bit less serious. I almost got to work on a revised edition of it, but then Mayfair went bust in 1997, so that would have been the first thing I ever worked on, really. Ah well, things that could have been. Dread is a one-trick pony of a game, but when that trick is a triple backflip through a burning hoop while smoking 3 cigarettes and ham-boning, you know, it's a pretty good trick. Dread's the game that uses the Jenga tower, and then as you do things, depending how difficult they are, or if they're difficult at all, you have to take, sticks out of the Jenga tower, and then if it collapses, you fail horribly and you die, or you're about to die. So it's great for one-shots, it is great for new players, and it is great for creating an atmosphere of tension and worry and concern and danger avoidance and that sort of thing. So it's great for that, and as such it also helped inform one of my games, Irrepressible, where you use a bag of beads instead with one black one. So yeah, it's great at what it does, but it only does that thing. But a lot of horror games are best as one-shots anyway. I'm gonna be a wee bit cheeky. Blood is technically one of my games because I pursued the license and made the second edition. However, the first edition is the one that I fell in love with, and which I had nothing whatsoever to do with, and if I hadn't loved it, I wouldn't have pursued it for the license. It's bloody, It's nasty. There's nothing hugely innovative in it, but it is cool and it's great for rather deadly one-shots and survival horror. If you like it grim and gritty, if you like people like Sean Hudson as horror writers or Graham Masterton, then Blood is great for that sort of thing. Any horror game list has problems if it doesn't have Vampire the Masquerade on it. This embodied the spirit of the 90s, the gothic revival, the gothic punk aesthetic, millennial angst, all of those things, which can be a little bit hard to tap into, 24 years down the road from that. But at the time, it was definitely part of the zeitgeist, and for all the trials and tribulations, beneath every edition somewhere there is a good game. But this is gothic horror, not as visceral or as bloody as other horror might be, but even if you can't get that mood at the table, low-powered superheroes with fangs is pretty fun too. Vason is a bit of a new kid on the block compared to a lot of these horror games, and it shares a lot of DNA with Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, it's investigative, it's horror, and it's set in the past, though in this case it's a kind of fictionalized Victorian era more than anything else. The books are dripping with atmosphere, the art is fantastic, it's more European and so may vibe better with people from Europe, and it's more focused on a kind of folk horror setting. It also has more longevity than Call of Cthulhu might, and there are aspects to the game that remind me of Conspiracy X in terms of base building and increasing your character's knowledge and so on over time. I think this one might stick around and become a favourite. Morkborg might seem like an odd choice for a horror list. After all, it's a fantasy game, but there's no reason you can't mingle fantasy and horror. And why Morkborg rather than Lamentations? Oh, I've heaped enough praise on Lamentations of the Flame Princess elsewhere. Now, Morkborg certainly has its shortcomings, but it is absolutely dripping with atmosphere. It embodies the grimdark style. It has been much imitated ever since and has clearly inspired a lot of people to get into darker fantasy. So yeah, it's disappointing in a lot of other ways. It's all mouth and no trousers, but the mouth is interesting, visually stimulating, inspiring, and horrific. It certainly sets you up for the atmosphere, which is some of the hardest stuff to do in a horror game. The Laundry Files is technically another Call of Cthulhu setting. It's based on the series of books by Charles Stross, where you play agents or office workers of a secretive British organisation, meaning that this kind of combines Lovecraftian horror, office comedy like The IT Crowd and James Bond, but somehow that mix put together all still works, and you can still have moments of genuine horror and emotion like you get in the books, alongside the laughs and the weird juxtaposition of the familiarity of work and the existential horror of work. Cult is an excellent game and an excellent setting. Barker-esque, highbrow, artistic horror that plays with complex ideas, heresies, symbolism, deep stuff, all in a creeping horror setting as worlds collide and characters, if they survive long enough, can become as gods. For my money, 3rd edition, Death is Only the Beginning, is the best. The rules are a little bit clunky, but they're better than that shit show that is Divinity Lost, which is just hot garbage. Good luck finding an older edition in good nick. but this new edition is just not worth it. It's not the same game, really, at all. I'm going to be proper cheeky now, as is my prerogative, because this is my channel, and say one of my own games, Actual Fucking Monsters. I made that game in reaction to the wussification of recent horror games and attitudes, even before Candela Obscura was even a glint in anyone's eye. In this game, you're monsters in a kind of Nightbreed style. You are going to die. Your actions catch up with you. It's about surviving as long as possible while being forced to transgress against society and to bring heat down upon you. I really need to get round to creating a consolidated and mildly updated edition, but who has time? Well, that about wraps it up for this video. Are there any other top 10s you'd like to see me do? Do you have any questions for Roll for Insight that you'd like to get my commentary on? Let me know. If you disagree with my list, feel free to be wrong in the comments below, and if you agree, feel free to be right in the comments below. I will see you soon. Zang.
Flick Pig. There's no big story to this, even the title's just a way to get away with writing Fuck Pig. It's not some earth-shaking attempt to thrust upon you the evils of meat eating. I eat meat because it's fucking delicious. David Cameron got me thinking about pigs. Then I got into some arguments with vegans. Then I made a horror dungeon game in which you play pigs trying to escape a horrible, fantastical slaughterhouse. That's about it. If that upsets you, do one. A print-and-play OSR dungeon crawl with pigs. Available at post-mort.com and drive-thru-RPG.
The gallows is cold and the gibbet is lonely. We'll make things hot for you here. The gallows is cold and the gibbet is lonely. We'll make things hot for you, Joe.